Alright, I am going to try something new today, building off of what I did yesterday. So I'm going to take this mess from this whiteboard and I am going to erase it, and I'm going to try to flesh out this little quadrant that I talked about yesterday. So this is an experiment for me to see what it's like to try to kind of capture my thought process live. This is basically me ideating, and so it'll give an example of how my mind works, how I flesh things out, how I come up with my systems and frameworks, where my mind goes down different rabbit holes, and why that turns into never actually fully finishing the system or sharing it with other people. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how this goes. So the premise of what was on here before, basically I was trying to come up with a way that I can force myself to be productive with things. I have recently diagnosed myself with ADHD, which answers so many of my questions. So that, with that in mind, is how I came to this problem, is how do I accommodate my natural tendencies and force myself to focus. So I came up with this 4-quadrant thing. So for each task, it'll fall into one of 4 quadrants. Number 1 is something that I like to do and something that is easy to get into. So that's the top left. Top right is something that I like doing, but it's hard to get into or requires flow or a certain kind of headspace. Bottom left is something that I don't want to do, but I can get into it easily, I can force it. And then bottom right is something that I don't want to do and it's very hard to force, get into, there's a big hurdle. So this is my refined, it's not going to work well trying to display this, but I don't have a whiteboard stand or anything, and this camera's just on a railing so I can't really move it. So anyway, hopefully you can see that. This is my simplified 4 quadrants. So, to reiterate, a task that I like doing and it's fairly easy to get into, something I like doing but it's harder to get into or requires a certain headspace, don't want to do but can force it, and don't want to do and it's very hard to get into. So that was the quadrant that I just came up with yesterday. So then my thinking goes to, okay, I have this quadrant. Now I'm going to approach whatever I'm doing, and that would be placing the activity in one of the 4 quadrants. So I look at the 4 quadrants, I place the activity. Once I've done that, then there are 2 options. That's where my mind goes. Number 1, accept reality. Accept where it falls on the quadrant. Don't try to change it. Or 2 would be change where it is on the quadrant. So this is where we're at right now. So we've got our activity, we look at our quadrant, we place the activity, which leads to accepting where it is or trying to move it into a different quadrant. So accepting, I'm not going to go deep into, because there's not as many options as to what to do. You basically accept it, and then that reality makes it so you have to improve your processes around forcing it. So you accept where it is, and then I don't know, make it more conducive. Okay, except let's say create strategies. So you can't move it. You can't move where it is on the quadrant. But what did I just say? Man, this is interesting. Just trying to talk through it. Because normally I'm not talking through it to someone else. And I feel like I don't want to waste people's time and just be sitting here thinking. So this is a different workflow for me that I've never done. So I can accept the activity where it is, and then, strategy, that's the word I want. Create strategy. It's hard to spell and talk and be engaged at the same time, so. All right. If we accept where it is on the quadrant, then we have to create strategies around that to force myself to do it. I can also choose to try to change the quadrant it is in, though. So there are different strategies around that as well. So one thought that I had that was on the whiteboard that I erased is escaping me. So I can reframe. Reframe. And a thought that I had yesterday was, what if it couldn't be in the bottom right quadrant, or even in the bottom quadrant at all? The reality is some tasks you think have to fall into those categories, but could I actually reframe it so that the activity was never placed in the bottom half? That would take a lot of mental gymnastics, and I don't know if it's possible, but what if it had to be, it's hard to think and talk and write. What if it had to be in top half, let's say. All right, so reframing is one option for how to change. So we accept where it is and create strategies around that acceptance, or we try to change it and reframe maybe where it is. And essentially, you're going from this reframing is answering the question, how do I move it from one quadrant to another? How to get to better quadrant, let's say. So, the goal is not always necessarily that it needs to be in the top right quadrant. I think that's just the ideal, right? Ideally, everything you do is like fun and not forced. And like the top right is, the top half is where you're trying to get to, not necessarily the top right, because the top right is like can be a flow state, or it can just be something that just requires more energy, or you can have just a fun, easy task, and that's just as good. So basically, top half is one option of, are you trying to move the activity into the top half? So that is one approach. How do you get the activity to be in a different quadrant? Or how do you make the most of each quadrant that it's already in? So that's a good question to write down next to the create strategy. So how do you make the most of the quadrant that it's in? How to, what's a shorter word for make the most of? Arbitrage. How to, I'll just say make the most of it because I'm on the spot. Alright, how to make most of it. I will leave out the word the. Alright, so this is where my thinking goes. Now I've got my two options: to accept where it lies or to change where it lies. So that led me to the question, if I'm accepting where it is, how do I make the most of it? How do I create strategies that work as well as they can for the quadrant that it's in? Versus, what if I change something, reframed the quadrant it's even in, try to get it into the top half, try to get it somewhere else. So that's my thinking for today. Last night when I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, trying not to think about anything, this was not on my mind at all until it was. So in this changing option, my mind went to three things. So I thought, firstly, what were the three words I used? Urgency was one. Okay, I focus better and I can force things more if there's a sense of urgency. So one was create urgency. And I am blanking on the others because I'm engaged in something else right now. Okay. Routine and curiosity. So urgency, routine, curiosity. So routine, basically make it a habit, make a routine, and then it's much easier to do. Or for me, it has to be engaging. I can hyper-focus on things. I can force myself to do things. Curiosity is my easy way in. So that's what I came up with last night, just as I was lying in bed to my smart speaker. I told it those three words: urgency, routine, and curiosity. So playing with those, the urgency and the curiosity are in line with kind of reframing. And then the routine is, I guess, in line with more accepting of where it lies. So let's say number one is conducive to, I just did that wrong. Urgency is reframing. So we'll say that is a number two option. Routine is more accepting and working around things, accepting your reality, creating habits. So that goes with accepting, number one. And then curiosity is a little bit of both. I'm putting it down as you're changing it because you are kind of reframing where it's going. So yeah, I like that. They actually, this is a new thought. So it probably doesn't really help even showing this whiteboard as I'm talking through it, but basically, if option one is to accept, option two is to change, urgency falls more into the option two category. I'm reframing things for a sense of urgency. Routine falls more in line with accepting. This is just where the activity lies. So I have to create habits, routines that just force me to get into that. Now, obviously, you can create routines that are fun and that are in the top quadrant as well. But in terms of the strategy, that would be kind of the best option for if you're just accepting your reality. And then curiosity would be in line with changing, reframing things. How can I be more engaged in this task? How can I trace it back to something I'm interested in, something that's meaningful to me? That is the secret for most of my stuff, is curiosity. Urgency is, again, something that I can force, but like curiosity is where I want to be. Because if I'm curious, then I don't need urgency and I don't need routine. So now that I'm talking out loud, and my brush is now under here, I'm going to put an asterisk next to curiosity, because that's the one I want. That's where I'm trying to get to. I'm going to put in brackets flow. So the peak of curiosity and productivity would be to get into the flow state, essentially. So flow is basically, I'm going to put in the top right quadrant. So if the task is too simple, then you're not going to be able to get into flow. But if the task is in the sweet spot, then you will get into flow. So flow in this context can only be in the upper right quadrant. So again, flow is not necessarily the goal. The goal is to get the activity done. So the activity might not require flow. It might be easy and you can just knock it out and that's fine. But there are some tasks that are flow that require flow in order to finish, and then some that are just fun enough, engaging enough that you just slip into flow. So it's like I guess there's an unforced flow and a forced, like an unforced flow where it just happens, and then a flow that matches the task where it is hard to get into, but once you've gotten over that initial hump, then you're into the flow state. So yeah, we've got curiosity with an asterisk because that's what drives me. And then, yeah, in brackets, flow, which the goal, again, is not necessarily to get into flow. So I'll just put, how do you draw a target? I'll just draw some circles. This will represent the target. So the goal is not necessarily to get into a certain quadrant, to get into flow. I don't like this target that I'm drawing, so I gotta refine it. Now it's just an eyeball, which we can represent focus as well. Alright, it's looking a little more like a target or an eyeball. Now I've lost my train of thought. Is, okay, not to get into a quadrant. The goal is finish the task. And ideally make it as enjoyable as possible. Make the process as easy as possible. So, yeah, I'll just add that. Easy and enjoyable, which conveniently start with the same letter, which I always like little things like that. So now we've got our aim, our goal. Our goal is to finish the task and ideally make it easy and enjoyable, so I can just keep doing all the tasks, because there are an endless number of tasks, an endless number of things that I'm interested in. So, speaking of easy, enjoyable, same letter, I will circle back to the thought that I had this morning. So last night, I had these 3 words, urgency, routine, curiosity, that I wrote down as a note on my phone. And then this morning I was looking at the note on my phone, and the word create was before it create routine, urgency, or curiosity. That's my way in. And then I liked the word create, but then that create, I didn't necessarily want to use create for each of them. I thought, what if I used a different word? But then they all turned into C words. So then I was coming up with a brain dump of words that start with C. So creating routine, I thought create consistency, but I didn't want to use create for everything. So I think create might be in one of them, it might not, but so this urgency becomes consistency, or sorry, no, these are a different order than on my phone. Okay, so routine, I like the word condition. You're basically trying to make it autopilot. So you want to condition consistency is what I had written down because that's catchy. Condition consistency is basically creating habits and making things as mindless as possible so they don't feel as forced. You've forced yourself, but in the past enough that it's kind of a skill you've built up. So then urgency, I had consequences was the word that came to mind, and then conjure was a word that also came up, which I liked as a verb because for me it's not just creating urgency, it's conjuring urgency. Like it's more involved, it's more forced. So yeah, conjuring feels more forced. So conjure consequences. Yeah, because I can work under pressure. I work better with a deadline. I still don't like forcing things, but I do work better with a deadline. I can't write the word consequences and talk at the same time. Consequences. I do like responsibility. So for me, this urgency, the phrase that came to mind was raise the stakes. So I can work better if there are consequences, but the stakes don't have to be high enough where there's a negative consequence. It could be a positive, like responsibility. So let's just put positive and negative sign on here. So that represents there's a range of these consequences. Like consequences to me sounds negative. So there's my little plus minus just to signify that there's a range of ways to create urgency that can be more forced and have negative outcomes, or they can be fun. Like you can gamify things. That's a great word. Okay, so now I gotta write down gamify. On the positive side, we'll call it gamifying. Gamify and fun. And then, I don't know, you can't really read that. That's squished together. Oh well. Gamify and fun. And then the negative side is forcing things. And let's just say repercussions. That's the connotation. Repercussions. Man, I've never really talked out loud. Getting a phone call, nobody ever calls me. That's weird. Let's screen that call. I don't know why I'm screening it. I should have just hung up. Anyway, I get distracted easily. My phone is a big part of that, which is why I didn't want to use this for the video, but I had my notes on it, so that's what happened. All right, so we've got that sense of urgency we're calling conjure consequences. And then curiosity. Easy first word that came to mind was cultivate. I love that word. I use it a lot. Things I want to cultivate in my life. It just sounds fun. There's potential. Like it sounds pure, you know? So cultivate curiosity. So I guess curiosity is the one word that sticks out of the three. So cultivate curiosity. which is what I want to do all the time, every day, constantly. Cultivate curiosity. So my mind is usually pretty good with coming up with like frameworks and breaking things down, simplifying, so that like, yeah, I started with a 4-quadrant thing, even just today as I'm talking. So we've got our grid, our 4 quadrants. So there's my little diagram. So then I've got place my activity, and then I've got 2 options there, and then after that, I've broken those 2 into 3 different strategies. Each one is more conducive to one of these 2. So we've got A, B, and C. And then I can have different spectrums as well. But this is how my mind works normally. When I'm trying to come up with something, it's structured. I have to simplify. Simplify is one of my big words that is something that I like to do. So I've got learn, play, create, simplify were the 4 I've added to that recently, but those are the things I like to do. So simplifying, getting to the bottom of things. And for me, that's like fleshing it out enough for me to make sense of it. So as I was saying on yesterday's video, once I flesh something out and I get what I've come for, then I move on, and I never end up sharing the thing that I've made. And sometimes I do think it's genuinely helpful, that it's a good framework that could work for other people and not just myself. And those are the things that I want to refine and share, but I never end up refining them because, again, I've kind of solved my own problem enough that I can move on. So I do like fleshing out the systems, but I never get to the refining stage, or frankly, the implementing stage, which is one of my other issues. It's funny how many great systems and strategies that I come up with that I could teach, and this could impact someone's life and be like, whoa, like that changed my life. That's such a great framework. How did it work for you? And I'm like, oh, I never actually tried it. It just, this is how I worked out the problem. So that is another problem of mine, is that I solve my problems on paper, but not actually in my life. I don't actually execute on the things that I solve. So that's a glimpse into how my mind works. And okay, further on that note, because my mind just ideates, I had these 3 categories: urgency, routine, curiosity. I stumbled into making verbs with the letter C, and that was great. But then my mind goes into, oh, what about collaboration? I could coax collaboration or coax community, and it's like, oh, I could add a community element to all of this. And then so my mind goes to like, okay, let's add a 4th category, and how you can get other people involved in helping you get into one of these 4 quadrants. So let's put D down here, and I don't like the word coax because ideally you don't have to coax or force things. Politely ask, but coax was the first word that came into my head. Let's say coax collaboration, where you get someone else on board. And so this is where my mind goes like, oh, that's exciting, a 4th category, but also like, but I had a nice 3-part structure here with the other categories, and I don't want to complicate things, because if I have A, B, C, and D, then my mind is like, oh, but what about E, and what about F, and what about G? And then it becomes this whole big system instead of this simplified version. And I'm realizing I'm running out of time here. My camera cuts off after 30 minutes, so I'm going to keep going, but in order to not get distracted, I'm going to restart here. Man, as if I just talked for half an hour and that went by easily. I'm like in a flow state. How appropriate. So, my mind goes, yeah, I have ABC. I like this perfect 3-part structure. And then inevitably more thoughts keep flooding in. There's idea D, E, F, G. And so that is another reason why I struggle to actually share the frameworks that I create, is because I take this complicated problem that I have, I whittle it down, and I simplify it, and that's exciting to me, and I solve my problem enough. And then when I think about actually refining that system and framework to a point where I could share it with others, then I have to go deeper than just the initial ideation. And then in going deeper, that's when I find more categories, more things. Well, this doesn't really fit into one of the 3. And I want to get to the bottom of it so that I take absolutely everything into account. There's no room for error. Every possible issue that you could have could fit into one of these 3, or could fit into one of these 4, whatever it is. So then I've taken this thing and I've whittled it down, but then to refine it, I blow it back up again. Like, I feel like I have to have, basically a spot where everything fits, so that if I'm teaching something, no matter what your problem is, I could funnel it into my system. But in order to funnel it, it has to be wider again. I'm taking into account this and that and that. So this is a problem that I now have to solve, that maybe I'll do another live ideation process of how to get from idea, brain dump, to fully fleshed system to share with others. Do I do something like this, share the process that I have, present it as unfinished, but a good starter system, and then other people can give feedback, have questions, and then I refine my system as I go. That would prevent me from having to feel like I have to figure out all of the possible use cases and then fit them into my system, as opposed to letting it grow and change organically with other people's feedback. That's the other neat thing about randomly doing something like this, is that if I create this and I share it, this is just my idea phase, but I can get feedback on that in real time. If it's a garbage idea, not that I have an audience, but if I did, people could let me know right away, or here's the hole in your solution. And so it can be a back and forth engagement with other people in refining the system. So that's another approach, is to have that almost always be the case of, here's my framework, this was my ideation phase, do you think this works as a framework? Do your issues fall within this system? And why or why not? And then I can go from there. But yeah, one thing that I do struggle with a lot is this going from big idea, simplifying, refining it, and thinking, oh, this is robust enough and makes sense enough that I could share it. But then I want it just a little more refined to make sure that I have thought things through past just the ideation phase. But then when I continue to think, then it blows up. So yeah, we've got D for coax collaboration, getting other people involved. When, like, initially this was just a sketch yesterday of me trying to solve my own problem of how do I finish a task. So that's the other thing. I have this goal that I made of finish the task. And in talking about all of this, I've lost sight of this goal already. That the framework for this is to finish the task. So the heart of it was, how do I get myself to finish a task? And ideally this framework is something that works for other people as well, but yeah, I also get lost in, this was supposed to be a simple system for me, and now I've turned it into like, oh, this is something I could teach other people. And then, yeah, again, it goes from simplifying to blowing it back wide open again, So don't lose sight of the goal when I'm trying to come up with these frameworks, because I want to simplify it. I don't want to overcomplicate things, which is why I like to simplify. But I feel like there isn't really a way to simplify it to the point where it's refined enough and has enough value and quality to share without having to go past this ideation phase and make it more complicated. Because, like, in order to simplify something fully, you kind of have to overcomplicate it and then take away everything until it's simple again. Like, I feel like you do have to take everything into account in order to have a robust system. But again, maybe I don't have to have that as part of my process initially. Maybe I thrive most in, well, I know I thrive most in just this ideation phase and not in the completing the task phase. I don't finish the tasks. I start the tasks. I like the ideas I come up with. They're good enough for me, and that satisfies the itch, and I can move on and not implement the thing into my life. So maybe I don't force things. That's, part of this for me is I don't want to ever have to force anything with getting tasks done. So if I embraced how I'm wired and I leaned into this ideation and didn't worry about the finished product, because this is, I'm creating a video right now that is a finished product that I will publish. So it's not the finished product that I think in my head is the finished product, because I want this to be a robust framework that I can write about and share and teach on. Like, I would love to take these sorts of ideas and make online classes and courses with them, and ideally make money in doing that. And that, is the front runner for something that I think I would enjoy doing, that I think I have potential in this area, that I have just how my mind naturally works, that I do have something to bring to the table, that I could create this sort of content and could have courses for people to take and flesh out. So, like, I do want to, that's the other problem, is I do want to have other ways of expressing these things. I like the ideation phase, but I also love the idea of creating a comprehensive guide and an online course. And so I want the epic, refined, finished product, but I don't tend to ever get there because I stop after the ideation phase. And so I could plot in these categories. All right, let's do a walkthrough right now. So for me, ideation phase right now, I'm getting into flow. Like, I just talked for 39 minutes, which is ridiculous, just on a whim with my whiteboard. So I would call that flow state. I'm, something that, for me to talk for 39 minutes straight and not totally lose my train of thought and get sidetracked and actually still be engaged at the end of 39 minutes as an introvert who doesn't like talking that much, that's flow. So we're up here in the top right. So, interestingly, let's say the finished product, in this case, we're talking about creating an online course. So right now, the ideation phase for me is flow, top right. The creating the online course, there are aspects of it that actually are still in this top right quadrant, but are not flow, that I do have to force. So problem solving is something that I enjoy doing. So if someone had something that didn't fit into 1, 2, or A, B, C, or possibly D, then okay, that's a new problem for me to solve, and I can can keep refining, so that's in the refining stages past the ideation phase. There are aspects of the refining stage that I do like, that it is a problem to solve. Okay, how does that now fix this? Can I still incorporate it into the system? So problem solving is up here, but it's not flow, it's just hard. The refining stage, there are aspects of it that are just mundane, so there are aspects of it that would fall into the bottom left, where I don't like doing it, but it's necessary. I can do admin stuff. I can upload my YouTube video and write the description and tag it and everything. I can do basic things even if I don't want to. I can see how it relates to the goal, and I can force myself to do it, and it's not a big deal. But other parts of the finishing stage I don't like and are very hard, because finishing for me in general is not something that I really get overly excited about. And that is part of my issue that I'm aware of. It's always been that way. For me, creating is fun, but the idea is what's fun for me. The idea is the most exciting part. A lot of people like finishing things. They get satisfaction from finishing. They feel good. They get a reward for that. I don't. I get excited at the beginning, and then it's downhill from there until I finish. Once I finish, it's like, okay, I finished the thing. It was draining. It was a long process, but I worked it out. I'm proud of myself for pushing through, but I don't get a sense of satisfaction. I get a sense of satisfaction only initially. So that is a big part of why I don't finish. And so that makes it hard to create an online course, is because once, when I start in the top right, when I start with flow and then can never get back there, and it turns into the bottom right quadrant for the other 90% of finishing the project, then that's why I don't. It makes sense that I can't just force myself to sit down, flesh this out more fully, get a script, get graphics, get a high quality production set up, and film it and edit it and learn a platform to create an online course with. It makes sense why I don't finish the things that I start in terms of bigger goals, like wanting to create an income for myself with creative things. I like the initial stages, and then after that, my curiosity is gone. My sense of urgency is gone. I don't care about it anymore. I want to finish it, but if I start out with, again, the flow state, and it's all downhill from there, then I don't have motivation to actually see it through, because that initial flow state comes so easily. Everything just came so easily to me right there, and I didn't have to force any of it. And in order to get this, let's say, into an online class, then I'm 1% of the way there with this fun phase, and then the other 99% is just persistence. It's just struggle to get the product to a point where it is valuable enough to share with others and maybe make some income someday. So that is my problem. This is my little framework that I came up with, and I am getting worn out now from talking. I am shifting out of the flow state. But this is how my mind works. This is how I operate. I went through a deep work session flow state, brain dump, ideation. Now I'm exhausted. But I got what I came for. I created a little framework on here. I talked a lot. So yeah, this is my finished product for today. And like, this is obviously unfinished if it were an online course, but it is finished as creating content. And that's another thing that I'm trying to play around with is, you know, what does it look like for me to finish? What does it look like for me to create content? What if I didn't force things? You know, the problem is I would like to make an income someday with things that I enjoy. So that's where my issue comes into, like, at some point I do have to force things and create more refined content. But then again, maybe I don't. Maybe my sweet spot is just this, and then, I don't know, maybe it doesn't even turn into an online class ever, even though that's something that I really want to do. Like, I like teaching, I like coming up with frameworks and systems, but maybe this is good enough. Maybe this is still robust enough that it is valuable to others, and they'll keep coming back for this, for impromptu whiteboard sessions on, you know, the surface at the top of my stairs. So yeah, that's a lot of stuff. And like I said, that was flow state for most of it, which is really cool. I don't know why anyone would have watched this whole thing, but it was a very interesting experiment for me, and I'm liking how this came out and how I was able to incorporate that with my own struggles of why I don't create content and why I don't finish what I start. I feel like it was a nice, like, it was much more cohesive than I thought it would be in just winging all of this, which is fascinating because I don't normally like winging things. That's why this YouTube thing has been weird, because I never started for so long because I had all of these ideas and I wanted to refine them, and I wanted to have a nice setup, and I wanted to do all of these things before I got my ideas out there. And then I just went for it, and I didn't worry about any of the other stuff. And here I am 34 videos later or something. That's crazy, where I'm just literally turning on the camera and recording, and like, I'm an insecure person. I am generally not confident in who I am. And I don't think that I'm that great of a conversationalist or a speaker, and yet I can just hit record and create a video and upload it and not even really care anymore. Like, the barriers aren't there. I removed the barriers to create an environment that allows me to just hit record, and that allows me to finish. Okay, so finishing happened because I removed the barriers. Oh, now I'm getting into a new thought. Okay, where does remove the barriers fit into? That's not like urgency. It could fit under routine. Okay, I'm not gonna keep ideating and flesh this out too much longer, but so I was able to publish because I removed the barriers. So I'll see how that plays into things. But in starting the channel and removing barriers, that for me was based partly on Tim Ferriss's popular question of what would this look like if it were easy. So yes, I would like all of these other things in place, but I could literally just hit record. Like, these vlogs are never edited because I don't like editing. I like aspects of it, but I don't like being forced to edit just to get my idea out there. So I just chose not to ever edit these videos. Unfortunately, I'll have to edit this one because it's so long. I have to take it into my software program to combine the clips and then export it. But I removed the barriers, which allowed me to finish the task. So what would it look like if it were easy? That's how I finish things. Yeah, I don't know where, okay, my train of thought stopped there, but I guess I was thinking about content creation. So what if I didn't force anything? That's my goal in life, to never have to force anything. But with content creation specifically, because that was what I was thinking about yesterday that led to this system, was in the context of I want to finish creating the content that I want to create. I want to finish things in order to ideally have my own income by doing so. So I lost my train of thought again. But okay, so with those different categories, with each of them, which was for me like brand stuff, content, whether that's written or video, products, I like to do illustrations and have some products up online, but I don't consistently work at any of these things. It's sporadic because I go with whatever I'm interested in and I jump around all over the place. So how do I take each of those things, and teaching was the last category, and remove the barriers and make it easy? Make it so it's not forced. So it's never in this bottom half that I don't like doing it or that I have to force it. So like teaching, this is teaching essentially, like getting out a whiteboard, talking through an idea. I've just taught something essentially, and I didn't need to create an entire fancy online course to do it. So again, that doesn't make money. An online course would be the thing that I think would be the closest, or I guess the best fit for me to align something I enjoy doing with something that could make income. But yeah, how do I make it easier? That's part of this. If I plotted teaching in the quadrant, again, there are aspects of it that I love, the ideation phase mainly, but if it's 1%, I enjoy this, and 99%, now I just have to put in the work to execute the rest of it, then no wonder there's resistance and I don't finish. So creating content, what does that even look like for me? How much do I force it? I don't know, but I can use this system and figure it out. I can refine. I like how this is coming together. And this is like, I've talked a lot today, but on the whiteboard yesterday, like it didn't take long for me to scribble down all my ideas. So in like a solid hour, I basically came up with an entire framework and taught it, and it was just an idea that I'm sharing. Like it's still in its infancy, but there's enough here to go off of that it's still valuable content. So I can create this sort of content, and I can force more of it than I realize. But yeah, it's figuring out what does it even look like for me to create content. So this was a two-pronged thing. How do I approach creating content, but also how do I just approach finishing tasks in general in all areas of my life? So that is a very, very long-winded talk about those two things. And I weirdly enjoyed this experience. Like it was something I've never done before. But again, I removed the barriers, which allowed me to finish the task. It was pretty easy and pretty enjoyable. So I've hit my target, even though I didn't have a target when I started this video. It's all come full circle. It's all come together. I finished the task. So, task has been finished. I want to put like a check mark here, but it's not a check mark. It's like I need to draw an arrow. I don't know how to draw arrows. All right, I hit the bullseye. You can't really see the middle arrow anyway. I don't even know if I'm in frame. I don't know how many little notch thingies. Alright. I finished the task of creating content, of trying something new. I got what I came for. I have no idea if I'll ever look at this system again. I'm going to take a photo of it. And then when I need to use my whiteboard again, I'll erase it. And yeah, I may never come back to this idea ever again in my life. But maybe that's okay. I don't know, there's lots for me to think through still, but I am a kinesthetic person, and just writing things down, oh man, whiteboards, oh, I love whiteboards. Just a bigger surface to get what's in here on there, so this was fun. So maybe I'll do it again sometime. If you're still here, I don't know why, but thank you. That's unbelievable. Until next time.